So there we were, suitcases, dog, and $100. And we end up in Rome. Now, there was another student that followed Hugo Weisgall for the summer to Rome. And we were together in a fifth floor walk-up in Testaccio, a place near the pyramid of Cestius. And my wife cried for 3 months. On the way on the boat, she says, "Would you ask the waiter for some butter?" I said, "Waiter, butter, please." She says, No. Ask him in Italian. I says, "I don't speak any Italian." Because Italo-Americans growing up with parents that spoke Italian were more concerned about you speaking English and everybody speaking English. Funny how America has evolved. The immigrants of those days taught their children to speak English and to want to speak English. But we both, my wife and I, enrolled in the National Language School, the Dante Alighieri, which is the language school of Italy, and we began taking the Italian lessons. I took that for about 3 days. The class met in the morning. But every night, I would walk Via Veneto, looking for a job. Now, the Via Veneto in the 60s, if you know Fellini movies, the La Dolce Vita, which was after the Second World War in the 50s, had a certain air about it. The Donets, the Café de Paris, these were wonderful places to go. And even in the 60s, the actors that were doing the spaghetti westerns were still there. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you about one of those spaghetti western actors in a second, because when I walked the streets of the Veneto, a man would come up to me and say, "Do you want a woman?" Now, he said it in English because he saw my shoes, he saw the way I dressed, he knew that I spoke English. And I was a little embarrassed as an American. By the third or fourth night, same guy, "Do you want a woman?" I said, "No, I don't want a woman. I need a job. I play piano. I have a woman. I'm married." She's crying back at the place because I don't speak Italian and that she doesn't know how to shop. And when she goes out, she hands the money. We have no money. We're sleeping on the floors, by the way. We're sleeping on persianis. Persianis are window shutters. You know those pretty green things that you see when you see pictures of Italy and Rome? Well, I took those shutters off. I put them on the ground in the apartment that had nothing in them, and I bought 2 horsehair mattresses. You don't know what horsehair mattresses is because you live in America. But you could actually buy horsehair mattresses that you would lay on these things. And that's one of the reasons why she was crying for 3 months. So I say to my little friend who wants to supply me with a woman, "I need a job. I play piano." He says, "Oh, come with me." Now, the Veneto had some piano bars. Piano bars were something that should be explained in these days, but I won't. It's suffice to know that there was a piano in a bar. And I would play. I played, and the owner said, 3,000 lira. I get out my book, I look it up. I go, "Oh my goodness, that's $5. I'm working in Midtown Manhattan for $50 a night. $5? No, thank you." He says, "Okay, we go someplace else." I go to another bar. I play piano. The owner says, "I give you 2,000 lira. I went back to the first place, took the job at 3,000 lira a night, and stayed there for 2 years. Now, for $5, Europe was never good on $5 a day, even though the book said you could live on $5 a day. Eventually, we bought a refrigerator. Eventually, we had everything we needed to know. Hugo Weisgall left at the end of the summer, and I stayed until my daughters were born. I stayed a long time because you can't leave Italy. You just can't. And to be poor. If you had a choice to be poor in America or in Italy, you would have to be poor in Italy. It was wonderful, absolutely wonderful. You stop at a stoplight and you look and you go, "Oh my goodness. That was made in 6. 6. Are you kidding?" So, I mean, the Roman adventure was pretty amazing. Piano bar, saloon, until 28, till my next major moment, dramatic moment in my life, when I came in contact with a writer named Morris West. Shoes of the Fisherman, The Ambassador, the first one, the Children of Naples, the Children of something.
How did you meet him?
So I was now a hot piano player in Rome. Buonasera, Mrs. Campbell was being shot there. Brigitte Bardot was at my piano bar. All the people of that time, England was swinging, but we had discotheques in Rome, and Verna Lisi and Gina Lollobrigida. All the people were there at this piano bar. And now I was making $10 a day. I was really hot. So the writer Morris West, the two great writers that were there at the time that I became very familiar with were Gore Vidal and Morris West. They were writing there. The 60s for me was the 30s in Paris for some of the Americans. And if you don't know the reference, then we will never eat together. Sorry. Gore Vidal, Morris West had children, and one son who he was a little incorrigible. He got thrown out of high school, but he wanted to be a musician. He wanted teachers. He wanted me to teach him music, and my wife was a teacher and could teach him the British A levels or O levels, or whatever we did. So I taught. Morris approached me to tutor his son, which I did, and after a while, after 6 months, 7 months, whatever it was, I'm sitting by his pool at an enclave. Gina Lollobrigida is in the next house. He had picked me up with his chauffeur. His chauffeur had gloves. And to have a chauffeur have gloves, come on. And we were sitting by his pool, and he says, but Bill, tell me about yourself. What are you doing here in Rome? He says, well, I say, I'm a composer. He says, really? I says, well, yes, I mentioned my credits. Now, don't forget, I am a graduate of Juilliard, Louisiana State University. He says, well, he challenged that statement immediately. Composer, you write every day? And I go, hum. Well, not really. I play, I get up around 3. In other words, the language school went away as soon as I had the job. My wife completed the course. I learned the language, but I learned it at night in the saloons. So he says, well, I'm a writer. Every day I get up, have my coffee, and I sit down and I write. I write until noon, every day. And I knew that Gore Vidal did the same thing. I knew that. But he's now teaching me. He gave me a lesson. He says, you're not a writer. I'm a writer. I says, excuse me. We're sitting by your pool. Your chauffeur just picked me up with gloves on. And he said, no. I was not a writer. I mean, I was never with the chauffeur with gloves in the pool. I was a writer before that. He had 5 kids. He'd studied to the seminary. He had been 4 and stuff. He says, no. I always wrote. You are living a lie. Now, this struck me. This is a gentleman and a man, a literate man, a man that I would respect, not just envy in terms of his success. You're living a lie. You're calling yourself a composer. You don't write at all. You're a saloon piano player. That's what you do. I said, well, I'm doing this to make money. He says, of course you're doing it to make money. How much do you make? And I said, whatever, it's $300 a month, what, $400, whatever it was. He says, I challenge you. I'll give you $400 a month so that you can become a composer. So you can never let it be said that you didn't have a chance to become a composer. Now, you can keep my money and keep your job, but you can never, ever be said that you didn't have a chance to become a composer. Now, for some reason, this affected me in such an emotional way. I was shaking. So he takes out his checkbook, and he's, if it's a film, The check is there, and I am going like this. I took the check. I came home. I told my wife, told her the story, told her how it affected me. I says, I got to do it. Now I'm 28 years old. I have 2 children. Both of these girls of mine were born in Rome by this time. I mean, I go in that night to the hottest discotheque in Rome, and I tell the owner, I says, I can't come back. I quit. I tell my orchestra, it's a trio, sounded like Ramsey Lewis. People who don't know what Ramsey Lewis sounded like can YouTube him or iTunes him. We were a commercial jazz trio working in a discotheque, and we were pretty hot. I said, this is it. I'm not coming back. So that was the beginning of me becoming a composer. A full score of a 90-piece orchestra will have woodwinds, brass, percussion, strings, keyboards, harps, as big or little as you want. But it has to be put on a score, a piece of paper. Why? For extraction. In other words, how does the violin player get his piece of music? I sit down at the piano and I go, oh, baby, this really works for me. And I'm hoping, of course, that it works for the director. I mean, that's a given. And I hear this, and it's for big orchestra. Well, how does the little violin player get that part? Someone's got to put those notes down on a score for every instrument played. Now, let's say you don't know how to do that, but you know how to play the piano. Well, you can call an orchestrator who knows how to write for the orchestra, right? Now, you might not get that far. You might just have a good vibe about a scene. You might need an arranger. Well, I like the music to end here, but it never quite gets there for me. I mean, I kind of fumble around, and it's just sort of for me. So now the arranger might say, arrange your music. It's still your music. You sat there. Let's even say you're illiterate musically, which is fine. You don't need to be literate. You plink on the piano, you hit your little notes, and you get them in the right place, sort of. The arranger will get it in the right place. He doesn't necessarily know how to do it for orchestra, but the orchestrator will do that. And if you have the deadline that's coming in 2 weeks, and you're feeble, you might need a team of people to get you to the church on time. So let's say you're not feeble. Let's say that you pretty much know the music. Oh, by the way, it's a chase movie. There's 90 minutes of music. Oh, it's not a talkie. A talkie might have 30 minutes of music, 20 minutes of music. I've heard producers say, can you find some more music? They have to pay you the fee no matter what. So when this one producer could only find 20 minutes, I mean, he wasn't going to get a break. We're not writing by the pound, but he says to the editor, can you find some more music for him to write? Anyway, so why now you're not feeble, you know how to do it, but there's 90 minutes of music. And how are you going to do that in 2 weeks? So back in that 10-week schedules of contracts, we always had both kind of people. We had the feeble and the people that could do it. And in the end, they all used orchestrators. As a matter of fact, orchestrators made the transition into composers because they could go that way too. The guy coming in from this place, the feeble, I can write a great song, but I don't know how to write it down. He's as valid as anybody that can write a great song. I have absolutely no problem with him. I'm an elitist, there's no doubt about that. But he has validity. There's validity in the guy that can write or not write music, but just make the good sounds. So even in the old days, we had guys that could do song scores that needed people to technically write that music out on orchestration on a big long piece of paper so that the copyist would extract just the violin part and put it down on one piece of paper and hand it to the violinist. It's very time consuming. So orchestrators have always played a part of Hollywood, film and TV. I've used, I think, great orchestrators because you can't be a bad orchestrator. You can be a bad composer, but you can't be a bad orchestrator.
Today, the mock-up is common.
Yeah.
to give the director an idea of what the music is going to sound like. Have you had to do that, and how complicated a process is that?
We've gone over what an orchestrator is and how to get a score and why those people need the music. Now, from the days of synthesizers and digitizing, editing, both in film itself, we would send a film out to get a 3-foot dissolve, and it'd come back in a day. A dissolve, when one scene dissolves into the next scene, anyone who has iMovie or any little home thing can do that. That's a good and that's a bad. What is it added in films? In films, you don't have to wait a day to see the difference between a 3-foot dissolve and a 4-foot dissolve. Because if it's instantaneous, there's more on your plate. I want more. No, let's hear this. I do this and this. There's more tricks and there's more things to do. So what happened in the film, to the film industry, also happened to the music industry. You can play GarageBand and do a score. Yeah, you can. There's no question. The synthesizers replicate, in some case, other instruments, and in other cases are just their own little beeps and bops of whatever their own uniqueness are. So the composer now, with the replication of an orchestra, meaning it's not just the piano anymore. The strings, oh, it sounds like strings, sort of. Oh, they're sampled strings. They're the real strings, but they're digitized. Okay, pretty good. Now you have entree into all of this. So now the producer, who used to send out a 3-foot dissolve and wait for a week, says to the editor, let me see the dissolve. No, make it 4. No, make it 2. 3.5. Let's try it. This all happens in 5 minutes, and it's done. So to the composer, he says, let me hear it. What? Well, you can make strings. You can make the flute. His ear, he can't hear the difference whether the door is knocking or an atom bomb is just blown up 2 feet from him. But he's saying, I want to hear the strings. I want to hear the thing. And the composer's got it all in front of him. So it's called, now you mock it up for him, meaning for this temp track. Why can't it sound like the finished product? And by the way, you're doing it all by yourself. Why do I have to pay more? And another, by the way, is when we get to the studio, why can't I have that plus the orchestra? Well, the answer to everything is yes. So the mock-up is a part of our life. Like the temp track, it's no more than the temp track, but you have to do it, but that's why you need a team. How can you waste your time? Waste, I don't mean waste. Putting up, digitizing, it takes hours of sitting in front of a computer to do this. When they make these movies that have crowds of thousands and all that, those effects, people all over the world are doing this for days and weeks and years before it gets to the film. So the composer guy has to have people to do this.